Good evening, councillors and members of the public, and welcome to the first meeting of the Western Area Planning Committee for the new council year. Before we begin the committee meeting proper with the appointments of the chairman, I'd just like to draw your attention to the fire regulations on the screen behind me. There's no drill planned for this evening, so if the alarm does go off, please leave by the nearest exit and we'll congregate under the canopy of Waitrose. Please can I also ask that you make sure that your mobile phones are switched to silent, and councillors, can I also remind you to speak directly into the microphone so that your comments are picked up well by the webcast and the other people in the council chamber. So I'd like to move to the first item of business on the agenda, which is the appointment of chairman. You'll recall that on the annual council agenda papers and the appointments to committees, there was a nomination there for Councillor David Beeman as chairman of the Western Area Planning Committee for this council year. Is that agreed, or are there any other nominations? Agreed. Thank you very much, members. I'd like to ask Councillor Beeman to come and take the chair.
First of all, I'm afraid you have to excuse I'm a bit croaky tonight, but we'll have to last the whole meeting. The second item on the agenda is the appointment of a vice chairman, and I would like to ask the committee to confirm the appointment of Councillor John Rubini as vice chairman of the Western Area Planning Committee for the council year 2019-20. Is that agreed? The third item on the agenda is the minutes. I've just asked the committee to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of April 2019, which have been laid on the table for half an hour. Is that agreed? 4. Fiona, are there any apologies for absence been received?
Thank you, Chairman. I've had apologies from Councillors Sally Dixon, Dan Hunt, Kika Mirrlees, John Neal and John Ward.
Are there any declarations of interest been received prior to the meeting, or whether members have now any declarations to make?
None received prior to the meeting, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any questions received from members of the public?
No questions received, Chairman.
And any questions received from members?
No questions from members, Chairman.
Right, before we start, I'd like the planning team to introduce themselves, which saves my throat a little bit, so perhaps we can go around the table, please.
Barry Devlin, Planning Solicitor.
Paul McKim, Head of Planning.
Chris French, the Area Team Leader.
Rachel Kellis, Principal Planning Officer.
Chris Turner, Principal Planning Officer.
Beth Howland-Smith, Development Manager.
Hattie Arthurs, Deputy Development Manager.
Thank you very much. Next item, item 8. Beth Howland-Smith, are there any updates to government guidance or legislation, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. 2 appeal decisions were received last week where the inspector dismissed the appeals based on a lack of clarity about the impact on the Wealden Heath Special Protection Area. Natural England, who are a statutory consultee on development affecting a European site, have been consulted on the decisions and specifically the housing applications which are on this committee's agenda. They've confirmed, excuse me, that taking into consideration the distance of these units from the special protection area and the scale of the proposals, that these developments would not alone or in combination cause a significant effect, and that an appropriate assessment would not be required. Whilst it is recognised that Waverley is the competent and determining authority on this matter, on the basis of the advice received, it would not, in officer's opinion, be reasonable to refuse tonight's applications on the grounds of impact on the Wealden Heath Special Protection Area, and there is no need to undertake an appropriate assessment. There is therefore no barrier to determining these applications based on the impact on the Wealden Heath SPA. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 9. First point, the committee should know that in the event of a site inspection being necessary as a result of consideration of the application at this meetings, this will be held on Monday the 8th of July 2019 at a time to be agreed at the meeting. Move on. Right. The first item is an application open to public speaking. It's item A1, WA 2019-0030. Farnham Park Hotel and Restaurant, Lower Hale, Farnham, GU99RP. A proposal to change of use from agricultural land to a suitable alternative natural green space, SANG, together with provision of a new car park. Rachel, would you like to present this?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. To begin with, we've got the location and aerial view for you on screen. I've roughly outlined for you in red on the aerial view the outline of the site, and the plan as submitted by the applicant is here. The actual application site itself is the area outlined in red, which you'll see just here. You'll see from these that the site is currently open agricultural fields. Farnham Park, which is a historic park, garden and local nature reserve, is located to the west. That's just here. The dwellings on and adjoining Upper Hale Road and Hale Road are located to the north and east. So as you view it on here, that's the area I'm just pointing out just here. There is an existing access to the site, which currently serves the hotel, and that joins the Hale Road A325. So that's this point just here, you'll see it joins. The application site lies outside of the built-up area boundary within countryside beyond the Greenbelt. Turning to the proposal itself, the proposal is for the change of use of existing agricultural land in order to provide an extension to the Farnham Park SANG. SANG standing for Suitable Alternative Natural Green Space. SANG is a recognised means of avoiding a significant effect on the Thames Basin Heath's special protection area from additional new dwellings, residential dwellings. The Council's adopted avoidance strategy identifies that for new residential development within 400 metres to the 5 kilometre range of the SPA, developments are required to contribute towards suitable alternative natural green space in order to avoid a significant adverse effect on the Thames Basin SPA. One such SANG at the moment is the Farnham Park SANG, which lies to the west. If granted, the proposal would provide an extension to the Farnham Park SANG, which would have the effect of increasing its capacity in terms of the number of dwellings that SANG is able to mitigate for. Just to point out a few things as part of the layout plan, this is the proposed access which would come into the site. The site that utilises an existing access point which would be continued to serve a car park, which will be located just here. That then provides access to walkways around the SANG itself. There are a couple of points you'll see just to the top just here and further down. You'll see there are points which would allow connections through to Farnham Park itself, which would enable visitors from this site to use the existing SANG at Farnham Park and vice versa. In terms of built form, the only sort of hard standing area is obviously the car park just here, and then it will be the informal footways which weave their way through the site just here. Turning to the existing site photographs now. On the top of the screen, this is stood fairly centrally within the site, and this faces towards the residential dwellings just to the north and east. You'll see it currently is open fields, not a lot here to comment on. Moving down you'll see the existing hotel buildings, and that's where the access would pass through. And on the bottom right of your screen, that gate there is where the access would continue on from to serve the proposed car park. These photos on screen now show you better the existing access which would be utilised. On the top left, you'll see the existing car park for the hotel. The access point would come through here to serve the proposed SANG. Moving to the bottom left of the screen, this is the access point onto the A325. That then leads to a lay-by area which you'll see, or a secondary road in effect, which is this you'll see on the bottom right of your screen. And on the top right is the point where you'd actually enter and lead up to the site itself. The matters of consideration tonight are firstly the loss of agricultural land. The proposal is not, the application site, is not currently in an active agricultural use, and the land itself is not considered to be the best or most versatile agricultural land. As a result, you'll note in the agenda that officers raise no objection to its loss. In respect of access and car parking, you'll note that the proposal includes an on-site car park and would utilise existing site access. You will note from the update sheet that a response has been received from the County Highway Authority and that no objection is raised subject to the imposition of a condition. In terms of the impact on the countryside and the visual impact of the proposed use of the site for outdoor recreation and leisure is considered to be compatible with its location within the countryside beyond the greenbelt. The car park itself would introduce an area of hard standing, and officers do identify some visual harm resulting from that car park, and that is a matter which members are asked to balance against the other matters of consideration on the application and any benefits. Turning to the impact on residential amenity, having regard to the nature of the proposal and its use for recreation and leisure, the proposed activity is not considered to be particularly intensive, and as such, no adverse impacts on residential amenity are identified within your report. Turning to the impact on heritage assets, the site is adjacent to a listed Farnham Park. You'll note from the report that officers raise no concerns in terms of adverse impacts on that. Turning to the effect on the SPA and the effectiveness of the proposed SANG, the proposal could provide a strategic SANG which could mitigate for future housing growth in Farnham. There is an identified need within the local plan for additional SANG to meet the housing requirements. As such, the provision of this SANG is recognised by officers to be a key benefit, and significant weight is attached to that in reaching a conclusion within your report. In respect to biodiversity, the proposal will deliver ecological benefits through appropriate management of the land. You will note that there is a management plan recommended through condition to ensure that long-term biodiversity enhancement and also appropriate protection for protected species where they exist on site. If I can now turn members' attention to the update sheet. You'll note there are a couple of additional consultation responses on that. And also there are a number of additional representations that have come in. I won't read through them all in detail, but you will note that they include comments from the Council's Parks and Countryside team. They raised no objection to the proposed SANG and confirmed that a legal agreement would be required to secure the links through to Farnham Park. You will note that that is a condition of the recommendation before you tonight. The County Highway Authority and Surrey Wildlife Trust comments do result in additional conditions, and you'll see those additional conditions listed for you at the bottom of the update sheet. You'll also see some further supporting information regarding environmental impact regulations for you. With this in mind, I'll turn members' attention to the revised recommendation, which is set out on page 5 of your update sheet. As a recommendation A, that is that subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement, within 6 months of the date of the committee decision, to secure access and footpath links into Farnham Park, SANG, and to secure the long-term management of the SANG, and subject to conditions 1 to 5 on the agenda report, amended condition 6 and an additional condition 7 on the update sheet, that permission be granted. You will see that your agenda report also includes a recommendation B, That accounts for the event that that legal agreement is not completed and that the requirements of recommendation A are not met. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We have a public speaker for this item. Mr. Neem, David Neem, would you like to give you 4 minutes, please?
Good evening, members. My name's David Neem from Neem Sutton Limited. We are the planning agents for the applicant, Plot Farnham LLP. I must say I'm delighted to be presenting an application of this form to members this evening. As you'll note, this proposal seeks to provide an extension to the Farnham Park SANG, providing an additional 7.14 hectares in area. The proposal has been worked up in conjunction with Natural England and following advice received from officers, and therefore meets all of Natural England's requirements for SANG. There is a need for additional SANG in the Farnham area to accommodate the level of new housing that's currently identified in the Made Farnham Neighbourhood Plan. This level of need will of course increase in the context of the emerging Farnham Neighbourhood Plan review. Just to put that into context, this proposal will provide capacity for approximately 444 additional dwellings, depending on the occupancy calculation that the council apply at the time that it's required. The council's parks team has confirmed that connection can and will be provided into Farnham Park, and this will be secured through the Section 106 agreement, as will the ongoing management of the SANG itself, together with the mechanism for its transfer in due course. Members should be aware that the remaining land to the north, which was shown within the blue line on the plan earlier, is the subject of a current application pending registration. That application was submitted on the 21st of May, and that is for phase 2 of the SANG. This second application will add a further 4 hectares in area of SANG, equating to an additional 252 dwellings worth of capacity, bringing the total for both phases 1 and 2 up to 696 dwellings. Once this second planning application is determined, the whole area will become SANG, which should hopefully allay the concerns raised by neighbouring residents in terms of the future of this land. The first phase of the SANG is, however, key to the delivery of the whole area, and a positive determination tonight will enable my client to proceed with the legal agreement and, of course, the progression of phase 2. In addition, members, we are currently working with the Town Council to agree common ground ahead of the forthcoming examination on the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan review in relation to the delivery of the whole area as a SANG. So the delivery of SANG in this area will provide a significant community asset in terms of leisure and recreation, and in this regard, members, I respectfully request that you accept your officer's recommendation to grant planning permission subject to the completion of the legal agreement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well within time. Councillors, anybody wish to speak? Councillor Edmonds.
I have a series of concerns as regards to interpretation of the legislation, which we've had numerous discussions on. I would point out that the environmental legislation from the European Union should be clear and precise and understood by any party. I then have difficulty when I look at the site description measures of 7.9 hectares, which to me appears to be a Schedule 2 threshold, exceed a Schedule 2 threshold, which means that Schedule 3 should have been applied to consider whether an EIA was required. I have not had sight of the screening application, albeit that I've asked for the screening application. So I really need to understand why this misinterpretation of environmental legislation has taken place, and if I'm at a loss, then I will obviously refer it to the European Commission as regards to how the directive has been transposed. Thank you.
Officers, do you wish to respond?
Thank you, yes. Thank you for the question. If I could direct members, first of all, to the update sheet, which does provide some explanation on this point. The agenda report originally states that the proposal was not considered to be EIA development under Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 of the EIA Impact Regulations 2018. That is because suitable alternative natural green spaces does not fall with any of the categories listed under Schedule 1 or Schedule 2. The thresholds referenced just just now are for urban development projects, which this proposal is not considered to fall under. One element of the proposal is a car park, and that sometimes does form part of a urban development project. However, the size of it does not exceed the threshold set out in the regulations. However, whilst it does not in Officer's view fall within those schedules, it was, as part of a previous application, the subject of a previous screening decision in relation to a scheme for both housing and sang on the site. That's WA 2017-1746. The screening for that is included under that reference number and is available online. That was an outline application for the erection of 89 dwellings on the site to include 26 affordable dwellings. Ultimately, the conclusion of that screening exercise, and that included an assessment against the Schedule 3 criteria referenced, is that the development was not EIA development. So hopefully that provides some more background behind the conclusions in the officer report for you. Thank you.
Obviously, I need to see the screening before I can make any decision. Thank you.
Councillor Hess.
Could I just get clarity about the second phase of sang? I've got a couple of questions, actually, but the first one was to establish the second phase of additional sang. Can you wiggle your cursor around it? Right. Well, from that, it would appear that that allays some of the objections. There was an objection from a very eminent local resident who was a former mayor of Farnham, and he will be pleased with that outcome. And also Farnham Town Council's concerns that they wrote, were the whole site to be considered for sang with a more suitably situated car park? And I don't quite know what the intention was regarding a more suitably situated car park. The Farnham neighbourhood plan and the whole community would benefit. So that obviously would be more satisfactory to Farnham with the second phase included. Does that mean that there is now no possibility of a housing development? Presumably all that land has been allocated for sang. Is that right?
Officer.
Thank you. To provide some more clarity on the application, that has been submitted to the council, but it's not yet valid. So that, as it stands, it isn't online to view yet, and it's not subject of our consideration as of yet. When applications come into us, they have to go through a number of checks to ensure that the right documents are there and that all the plans are sort of aligned with each other, essentially. So it hasn't essentially gone through that phase yet, which is why I haven't got any more detail for you tonight in terms of what's available on screen. Essentially, to provide some more detail on what will presumably would likely become an application shortly. It will infill the space between this red line here and the residential area here. The car park itself is little different to what you see before you on screen here. What's important to emphasise is that this application does need to be determined purely on the basis of the application before you, because the application, which has just been and yet to be registered, is not yet a material consideration for you in terms of what happens on the adjacent site. Even were it to be, there is still a chance that other applications may come forward on that site. However, you've heard the agent speak on behalf of the applicant, which gives you some idea on the longer term intentions for it. However, at this stage, it is no more than an intention until we have a valid application and until a formal decision has been made one way or the other on the site. What I would add, however, is clearly any alternative proposal which comes before the council will be subject of its own scrutiny and consideration. As such, if an application comes in for anything alternative which was not acceptable to members or to the council, it would be within the gift of the council to refuse that application at that time. Thank you.
Obviously, in the wording of Farnham Town Council's comments, they referred to a more suitably situated car park. Now, my main concern about this sang as it stands, is the traffic into and out of it onto the A325, because that is one of the biggest traffic snarl-up pinch points in the whole of Farnham, apart from the bypass. Tonight, for example, driving here, the traffic was right the way down past Water Lane, where the Sainsbury's is. It was completely jammed, a hell of a tailback. And with additional housing coming on the stream, it can only get worse. So if an alternatively positioned car park, which didn't feed into or out of the A325 at the pinch point, could be found, I don't know if it can, that would be great. And that's something that Farnham Town Council have flagged up. Thank you.
Can I just comment that Surrey County Council on Highways, who are the relevant highway authority, have said that there is no problem regarding traffic, and we have to bear that in mind.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I have a real dilemma on this site because there have been lots of talks in the background, and as Mr. Neem said, there is a statement of common ground with the town clerk as we speak to put this entire site to a sang use. It's an interesting site. It's not an easy site. It's got all bits that are not quite where you'd like them. But given that we are here tonight to look at this particular piece of land, we cannot guarantee what goes on the top part. Now, I don't wish to, say that I don't trust people, because of course I do. But, we have to be realistic about this. And at the moment, as this application stands, we have a much needed sang, fine, a car park, which I'm not really very keen on a piece of land that we have allocated for enhancement in terms of green space, because it's of a high landscape value and high landscape sensitivity. And in fact, one thing we've been trying to do in the whole of this neighbourhood plan is keep this green land going right across. And we've talked for a long time about putting as much of it as possible to sang. So were this the application that I'm told is being validated, but I still haven't seen, for the full site, I had absolutely no hesitation. I would be supporting it 100%. As things stand with the uncertainty, I'm not sure that it's really fair on residents to make a decision on this site which doesn't actually protect it. And given what we've got in the report and given what the officer has just said, I'm not sure that we have that certainty that is either enough for either the town council or for the nearby residents. I wish that the previous, as I say, it's a very difficult one. Yes, it's very, you may shake your head, but the fact remains that as it stands, there is no certainty. Looking at that plan, in planning terms, we have no certainty for our residents that what I sincerely hope we're going to achieve working together happens, and that is my big dilemma tonight. I just wish the other one had come in at an earlier time and we were looking at a holistic approach to this site as a sang. We've even discussed with residents the buffer zone, which was put in at the time of the green burial, for those of you who are around for that, because quite frankly, I don't think the green buffer would be necessary if the sang were extended. I think the green buffer could easily become part of the sang. We would have a superb sang, a large sang. It would feed neatly and seamlessly into the Farnham Park. As this stands at the moment, with what Rachel has just said, I'm not sure that we have that certainty.
Councillor Rubini.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at the plan here, I have some problem with the siting of the car park. As many people know, isolated car parks of this type attract crime. Now, what I would like to see is a report from perhaps Surrey Police as to how to mitigate those crime circumstances. Is it possible to see a report from the officers about the mitigation of crime on this isolated car park?
Rachel, officers.
Thank you for the question. As it stands, we do not have comments from the police design advisor for you tonight. However, if this is a matter of concern to members, what I would note is that you have got a condition recommended for a management plan for the site. That certainly could include the car park itself, and certainly the police and crime advisor could certainly be consulted on that management plan to ensure that actually it is managed in the most appropriate way. Most likely you'll be looking at controls, likely signage to discourage overnight parking and focus the use of the car park during the day. What I would note for information, you may well be aware already, the existing car park on Farnham Park to the west, that is not subject of any controls. Notably, of course, you, as correctly pointed out, this is in a more, I suppose, distant location from street scenes, from the main road, that sort of things. So, as such, if members are minded to do so, we could incorporate that within the management plan condition tonight.
Can I come back and ask for that to be included, please?
Any other councillor? Councillor Clark.
Yes, good evening. Has the applicant provided any reason to the officers or within his application as to why he's being so generous to provide all this land for sign?
Thank you for the question. Not in so many words, but obviously many of you will be aware of the planning history of the site, and that has given the applicant a very clear steer on what would and would not be acceptable on the site. They've had 2 applications for residential development refused on the site, including one of them at appeal. That obviously gives a very strong message. They will also be very mindful of the current Farnham neighbourhood plan and policies contained within that, which obviously has a clear impact on what can be achieved on a site. And beyond that, this is really an opportunity to put the land to a use other than agriculture for what it is now. However, that's all the information I have, I'm afraid.
Can I ask a question? And I don't like doing this particularly, but because of what we've been told by Mr. Neal about a second application, is it possible to defer a decision on this for a while?
Thank you. It is open to members to propose to defer the application should they wish to do so. However, the one element of caution I would say is whether or not anything in that second application is going to change your consideration of the current proposal. I believe the concerns relate to how the land outside of this application will be used. Members are only tonight considering the use of land within the red sight line. Anything you grant tonight will not preclude, importantly, this site coming forward as saying. You're quite correct in that it doesn't give us any certainty as to what it will be used for. However, it will be within your gift as part of any subsequent application to decline or approve any subsequent application that comes forward. Within this members' attention tonight should be very much focused on what is within the application red sight line, which, if the principle of saying is supported and it is residential development or alternative built form that is the concern, the appropriate format for resisting that would be in any such subsequent application for residential development or some alternative on that site. Obviously, in terms of timing and deferring the application, clearly the application has progressed this application earlier to obviously try and get certainty as an applicant for how they can progress the site and on whether indeed saying would be acceptable. It is outside of an agreed time frame and it is open to the applicant should the committee defer the application to challenge on non-determination should they wish to do so. So it's really for the committee to consider whether deferral of the application would be reasonable having regard to those considerations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Coburn.
Yes, I think it's really the reservations that, you know, if you give permission to this, you've got the bits you don't like as well as the bits you do like. Whereas if you were looking at the whole plan, then obviously, you know, presumably there'll be tweaks to where things are and how they look. And all I'm trying to get on this site is the best of all possible SANGs. I spoke to Natural England about what we intended to do. And I mean, they are pleased, you know, thrilled actually with what we're intending to do, because quite frankly, Farnham Park is an exemplary sang. And some of the other sangs, we have one in Moore Park, which was part of an enabling development, and it's a disaster from a sang point of view. So, you know, there are so many, plus that, all I'm trying to do is to get the right thing. And I know I'm always accused of aiming for the top and perfection and everything else, and I should settle for something, you know, nearly there, but not quite. But, you know, I can understand the applicant. It's been a long, long time, and I fully understand and I fully support this bit of the land being used for sang. I just find it difficult when we know that we're told that there's another application in to give, you know, half a decision. It just seems sort of slightly more difficult than if we had the whole of the site. We could see exactly, you know, what it was going to be, what the land is that's not within the applicant's ownership, and just get the whole picture. And at the moment, it's just a little bit of an unknown. And I just feel that it's we could. I hope we end up with perfection or something, you know, as near as makes no difference. But I'm just trying to make sure that we do. I'm not anti-sang on this site by any stretch.
There's nothing wrong with perfection, Councillor Coburn, by any stretch of imagination. I suppose it could be open to the applicant to withdraw this application, couldn't it, and then put forward a new application? I think.
Well, if the committee decided to postpone a decision and ask the landowner to come forward with his second phase in goodwill, in good faith, then if that is his intention in the short to medium term, I wonder why he or she would not be in a position to bring forward stage 2 earlier. And also at the same time, I'd like to request that cycleways would be considered, because there is a very big movement in Farnham at the moment for interconnectivity of cycleways. It's quite a big green issue for people to get around the Farnham area on bicycles. So if that could be a consideration, plus also the possibility of relocating or resiting the access into the car park, so it's not directly coming off the A325, so that we don't have additional traffic movements at a huge pinch point. So there are a number of technical issues there which perhaps the landowner could consider. Thank you.
I mean, we have to determine this application within a certain period of time, don't we? How far off the determination?
Thank you. Yes, I believe it's extended until the end of this week. So if members were to defer this application, they would be reliant on the agreement of the applicant to extend that time frame further. It's within their right to decline to do this, and it is within their right to appeal on non-determination. Thank you.
Does Waverley have a local transport plan as other areas?
Transport is an issue for Surrey County Council, Councillor Edmonds.
Yes, but there are some borough councils that have done a local transport plan, as far as I can understand.
There is, of course, the chapter in the local plan, part 1, chapter 7, and sustainable transport. And there's one policy there. But otherwise, it's a Surrey County Council responsibility.
Thank you.
Chair, if I may, I've just come into the point that Councillor Hess raised. I'm afraid deferral on the matters in terms of relation to an application that may or may not be determined by the Planning Authority is something that I would recommend that we do not do. However, I have noted previously that members have raised some concerns around highway matters, and we have a response from the Highway Authority on those points, but it's well within members' gift to request further details around those highway matters, which could lead to a deferral.
May I reply? Well, quite frankly, the Surrey Highways recommendations are lightweight in the extreme. I mean, they're talking about curb radius. That's all. Nothing else. I mean, there's nothing about traffic flow on that main road. It's as if they don't know our area or live in our area or have to suffer the traffic congestion in our area. You know, they're just concerned about the radiusing of some curbs. That's ridiculous. Quite frankly, Surrey Highways need to assess this properly. It's very, very lightweight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hess. And Councillor Rabini?
Thank you. Can I just ask, as we're talking about the flow of traffic and adding to it, what's the expected car park usage? I mean, are we talking about 10, 12 vehicles? What sort of usage do you think it might have? The officers investigated?
Thank you for the question. The car park has capacity for up to around 26 vehicles. So that gives you an idea of sort of maximum movements at one time. It is worth noting in terms of highway safety, there was a previous application on this site for 89 dwellings together with a proposed SANG. Although that application was refused, it's important to emphasise that it was found acceptable on highway safety grounds with some mitigation. And clearly, when the County Highway Authority respond to us, they do undertake an assessment in terms of capacity, safety and a junction. The other point I just wanted to illustrate to you that in terms of going straight on to the A325, it would have to go through an existing car park here which serves a hotel just at this point. And then it's at this point here where it actually joins the main road. So there is a separation at that point until it does join that existing junction. Hopefully that's of some assistance.
Any other Councillor Hess again?
I would like to observe that those photographs must have been taken at about 4 o'clock in the morning when there wasn't a single vehicle. I mean, really, that's not reality. Anyway, thank you.
Mr. McKim, could you just clarify what you said out of it? Did you say that if we asked for further traffic, we could defer?
Certainly, Chair. I was just clarifying the points that if members were chose to, would seek a point for deferral, and given comments raised earlier around traffic issues, then seeking further details from the Highway Authority could be a matter for deferral.
Okay. I'm going to propose it on the grounds that it's just said on Mr. McKim that we defer this application. Have we got a second?
Which one? You.
So, just to be clear, Chairman, you're proposing a deferral on the basis of getting more detailed highways information regarding the access? Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. And Councillor Hess, you seconded?
No, it's Councillor Edmonds, actually.
Councillor Edmonds. Do any members want to comment on that?
Hear that? No, I was just going back to Councillor Rabini's point, because it was not just the traffic issue that he worried about, and if we are deferring, can we? That was on the safety of the car park, wasn't it? You know, rather than on the traffic. I don't know whether that's something we could also seek advice on.
So, members, the proposal is to defer in order to get more information from Highways on road safety around the access, and also comments from the police design advisor on the location and safety of the car park. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So the application is deferred.
Yes, thank you very much. Right. Move on. Right, move on to the next item. Item A2, WA 2018-0960. The land to the rear of Wickham House, 40 West Street, Farnham, GU 970X. Proposed erection of a dwelling and associated works. I would say I was the councillor who asked for this application to be called in. Yes, would you like to give present the application, please?
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. The site's located on the south of West Street. It currently comprises a two-storey brick-built Grade 2 listed building with garden to the rear. The application site is located in the garden of this dwelling. The block plan demonstrates the location of the proposed dwelling with each of the neighbours labelled on there and their individual historic listing. Photograph A in the top left. This shows a site from the street scene and would provide access to the site. Photograph B in the bottom left. Photograph B in the bottom left is looking northwest. This photograph shows the relationship of the site in relation to the two adjoining buildings. Photograph C in the top right is looking southeast from the area adjacent to the host dwelling at Wickham House. Photograph D on the bottom left is looking back towards Wickham House. You can see the house in the background. It's important to note the change in levels on the site in this photograph. Photograph A in the top left is looking towards the adjoining neighbour at the coach house. Photograph B on the bottom left is looking towards the roof of the Oast house on the left hand side, and beyond that is number 5 and 6 Mead Lane. Photograph C in the top right is looking northeast. It again shows the adjoining dwelling and their extension at the coach house. And photograph D on the bottom right is showing 41C, the coach house. This is a site plan which shows the relationship to the neighbouring dwellings. I'd point members' attention particularly towards number 2, the coach house here, where they've got a single-storey extension and then a walled garden to the rear of that. And also the adjoining neighbour at 41C, the coach house. This area here is a raised platform, raised area, sorry, I should say. Just to point out, the applicant here has demonstrated the lines from the windows of the adjoining property here. This is the application dwelling. The northern elevation, the elevation also shows the relationship to the adjoining properties either side. As you can see, the dwelling would be of a similar height to those neighbouring properties. The southern elevation features Juliet and roof lights serving the first floor. Again, you can see from this photograph how the levels do drop down towards the rear. On the eastern and western elevations, you can see a cross-section of how the levels change in site and the flat roof element and gable roofed elements of the proposal. The floor plans demonstrate the different stories of the proposal, and a roof plan to demonstrate the location of the roof lights. Officers consider the main considerations for this application are the design and impact on visual amenity, the impact on residential amenity, and the impact on heritage. I'd like to point out that the applicant has worked extensively with officers in reaching this final scheme, having been involved in a previous pre-app and having amended the scheme numerous times to try and overcome constraints of what we recognise a constrained site. In officers' view, the application responds well to the surrounding buildings, and this is supported by the comments we received by our historic buildings officer. I'd like to draw members' attention to the update sheet. There is an amended condition on there and an additional condition which related to environmental health comments. I'd just like to point out that on the update sheet, the revised recommendations should have included the reference to the completion of a Section 106 agreement in relation to payments for the Thames Basin Heath SPA, but officers are recommending that subject to that, to the completion of that 106 agreement and the additional condition and revised condition that the application is approved. Thank you, Chair.
We have a public speaker here, and I'd like to invite Andrew Tompkins, the architect, to come forward and give him for his famous form.
Thank you. I'm Andrew Tompkins from Abode Architects from Farnham, and we've designed this modest house for 2 local residents. This application has been the result of a collaboration between the applicant and the immediate neighbours, the planning department and the historic officer over 2 years. And the design has evolved during this extended time to accommodate a variety of different perspectives and expectations. May we highlight that there have been no objections from the neighbours to this revised design. The proposed house has been designed to appear as 2 converted outbuildings, such as a coach house and stables, which might have originally belonged to the main house at 40 West Street. The proposal will be an infill building, sandwiched between the existing houses at the rear of 39 and 41 West Street. And an infill building is considered to be the most sustainable form of development, as it is an economical use of existing infrastructure and a remedy for urban sprawl. Recent precedents for this successful form of development includes the new houses behind the Bishop's Table Hotel, a new house to the rear of the Language School, and 37 West Street. The proposed house is not visible from the street scene and would have limited impact on the appearance of the town. The applicants have lived at 40 West Street for over 10 years. They are planning for retirement and wish to build a home for life at the rear of 40 West Street. By supporting this application, councillors will be promoting a sensitively designed infill building, which will be the applicant's lifetime home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of questions on myself first. This will be liable to CIL, will it?
Proposed new dwellings are liable to CIL. Yes.
This will be.
Yes.
And the second one is electrical vehicle charging point.
Thank you, Chair. There is a condition requiring that vehicle charging points are provided should the application be approved.
I just Third question before says the revised recommendation on this sheet says completion of 106 agreement within 3 months, and the other says 6 months. It's 6 months, I presume.
Thank you, Chair. The period of time should be 6 months. Thank you, Chair.
Right, councillors. Councillor Edwards was first.
Thank you. This is in a congested town. I understand that Surrey County Council has... what?
No, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I thought you wanted to... I understand that Surrey County Council Highways Authority has put a construction management plan constraint on the development, which includes parking, loading, storage, prevent materials deposited on the road and on-site turning.
Thank you. Yes, condition 10 on the agenda requires that the submission of a construction management plan to be submitted and approved to the local planning authority.
Thank you. So that will include on-site turning?
Yes.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Coburn.
Yes, I think this is lovely. I have to say, when it was first mooted to develop this site, I wasn't best pleased. We've seen some awful examples of infill and, you know, totally unsympathetic materials, unsympathetic size. And I think this is a triumph of actually working, whether it's the officers I should thank or you, I have no idea. But I think it works really well. And, you know, obviously it's a constrained site. It's going to be difficult to develop, but that's town centre for you. We just have to deal with it as it comes. But I actually think this is a real sort of addition, and so grateful to see something that actually seems to fit in with the surrounding buildings. Because instinctively you would say, no, we're not going to build on this site. You know, they're going to put up some rubbish that doesn't fit in at all. But no, I think all of you who've been involved should be congratulated. I think it'll be an asset to the town and a really good design. And a few more of these in the town centre might not be a bad idea.
Well, it's certainly been a long time coming, Councillor Coburn, that is true. Councillor Hess.
Yes, I think it's a good scheme. Will the materials be conditioned? That's one question. Is it CIL on this? I thought CIL didn't apply to small individual house schemes. Is it 106 or CIL?
I just find the condition in a second. In relation to SIL, all new dwellings are SIL liable. Now, the SIL procedure does allow for exemptions. Whether or not the applicant takes up an exemption on this site, that's for them to decide, and that will go through our SIL officer, and we'll assess that application for that. And sorry, yes, condition 2, I think, requires samples of materials to be submitted before they are discharged.
Can I respond? Thank you, that's very good. Regarding the SIL or 106, whichever it is, are you able, I'm not sure, because this is my first planning committee, so I'm not sure whether discussion of infrastructure charges can be discussed here, but I'll ask the question anyway, because I think it refers to a contribution to the SPA. However, I'd like to know whether any money from that payment is going to go actually into the built environment, infrastructure in the local area where the development is taking place, actually for the benefit of people. I'm very supportive of protecting ground nesting birds, but I also think that our environment where we live should also have some investment from these developments. Thank you.
Just to clarify, you can only ever ask for a payment through a Section 106 to mitigate against identified harm that the development would cause. In this instance, there hasn't been no identified harm outside of the SPA. that would require mitigation. So we as a planning authority aren't in a position, or shouldn't, ask for any contribution that isn't required in order to mitigate against identified harm, and that isn't the case.
Any other councillor?
Just to clarify, Mr. Chairman, that, and Councillor Hess, the money will go to Hampshire County Council, who administer the. Yeah, I believe so. To administer the SBA payment and the payment for site access management and monitoring. So that won't go into the infrastructure fund.
Yes, you're talking about the Thames Basin Heath Partnership Board, and they have got a vast amount of money from the SPAs. About £6 million was invested last December, so I know about that a little bit. No, it's whether there's any money coming actually into the community for people where we live. You know, it's all very well to protect ground nesting birds. I'm fully supportive. I just want to know whether there's any infrastructure money for people, for our infrastructure, the footpaths where people walk, which are in bad order, for street furniture in the area, a bit of landscaping. You know, is there anything coming out of these schemes for the residents?
The officers, I think, want to respond.
As I understand it, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, there's probably a bit of confusion. There's two distinctly separate things that are happening here. One is the 106, which mitigates the impact in terms of, or avoids the impact on the SPA. Because that's a separate issue. The SIL the SIL contribution is the contribution for things like what you're referring to. SIL is something that's that operates across the board on all applications that come in for new housing, but the rules do allow for exemptions in certain instances. We don't know whether this would or not benefit from that, and we would, even if they would benefit from it, they'd have to go through the correct procedure. So it's not really kind of before us to decide whether or not they would benefit from an exemption, but that process is there, and the SIL charge is where you are securing those kind of infrastructure benefits, but that's against the set schedule of projects which have been identified through the SIL regime. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor, want to comment? Councillor.
Thank you. I too think it's a very sympathetic application. I think it's fantastic to see a designer and an applicant that are willing to bend over backwards to fit in, especially with the neighbours. And it's good to see that the neighbours have not raised any objections. I would say from experience, if there is a construction plan, it's one thing having a plan, it's one thing having the constructors adhering to that plan. So it would be good to inform the neighbours in detail of what the construction plan is and offer them contacts that they would could be in touch with if something wasn't to work out.
Thank you. I never know who I'm supposed to be getting, whether it's the deputy or the... believe you me, Councillor Clark, the residents will be on the phone the instant there is a van anywhere other than where it should be. And there will come a point where what is in the management plan is physically impossible. And it tends to come towards the end when you have a sort of a plumber, a kitchen fitter, a gardener, the whole load doing the bits at the end. You know, the bigger bits of the scheme, in a funny way, tend to be better managed because there's fewer vehicles and fewer contractors. But I've never known a scheme go by without somebody phoning me up about vehicles. It's a fact of life. And although most constructors do try and stick to the management scheme, it's when you get to these subcontractors and lots of them. But you will know, believe you me. Nobody will let you get away without being told.
Right. Anybody else wish to comment, or shall we move? Oh, Beth.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to really support Councillor Coburn's statement, we do regularly get complaints in relation to construction management plans, etc. So it is something that is perfectly enforceable. As soon as those details are agreed, they appear online, available for inspection by anybody who is interested in the project. And if they are concerned that the terms of that plan are not being adhered to, that is something that the Council's enforcement team would happily be able to investigate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Shall we move to the recommendation unless anybody else has...
That's 9 in favour, so that's permission granted.
Okay. Right, thank you very much. Yes, sorry. Again. Item B1, WA 2019-0314, Foxwood 1 Stonyfields Farnham, GU9 8DX, pages 49 to 62 of the agenda. The proposal is the erection of a dwelling, outbuilding and associated works following demolition of the existing dwelling and outbuilding as amplified by a street scene plan received 12th of April 2019.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll start by showing the location plan and aerial view, which you'll see just on screen before you here. The application site in question is located to the southeast side of Stonyfields, just here. The application site at present contains a 2-storey detached dwelling, which you'll see is positioned with a reasonable setback from the road, just here. And it also has a further outbuilding just to the side here, together with further smaller outbuildings in the rear garden, which you'll see is quite lengthy. At present, the site has a single vehicular access serving the site. That's just here. Now I'll take you through some plans and photographs of the existing dwelling. On the bottom left, this is a photograph of the existing dwelling here. And this is a photograph of the rear. There are also some smaller plans which show you the existing dwelling in plan form. These are some further site photographs. In the top left, you'll see both the rear of the existing dwelling, and you'll also get to see in the distance one of the neighbouring properties. On the bottom left of the screen, this is stood with my back to the existing dwelling house, looking towards the main street scene, and you'll see a further house opposite. Primarily, the street scene comprises detached dwellings of a similar, varied size and scale, but typical to the range of the existing dwelling house here and the dwelling to the left. On the photo on the bottom left of your screen shows you the land level differences between the application site and the properties which front onto Waverley Lane. So you'll see that the application site is set down in height relative to those properties. And on the top right-hand side of the screen, this is a further view and photograph of the rear garden. Turning now to the proposed elevations. You'll see that the proposal is for the erection of a replacement dwelling and annex following demolition of the existing dwelling. The proposed development provides 6 bedrooms together with an integral garage. You'll see that just here. The proposal is 2 stories in height with further accommodation also included in the roof space, and you'll see the dormer windows included within that roof space here. In terms of measurements, the eaves height of the proposed development would measure 5.8 metres and 9.5 for the ridge height. Here you'll see the proposed floor plans for the development, and this illustrates that the bedrooms are split over 3 levels, which includes accommodation in the roof space. And you'll also see a roof plan on the bottom right-hand side. Turning now to the existing and proposed street scene. On the top of the screen, this is a proposed street scene with the proposed house shaded or faded out slightly just here. And the existing dwelling and street scene is shown just here. This property here, which you see on the left, fronts onto Waverley Lane, whereas you'll see to the immediate right, numbers 3 and 5 are positioned facing Stonyfields in a similar manner to the application property. This comparison really illustrates that the proposal is for quite a sizable increase in the scale and proportions of the building compared with that existing. Well, you will see by points of comparison, quite a large 2-storey replacement dwelling was proposed and implemented next door. That's number 3, you see highlighted just here. And there are similarly substantial dwellings also to the east along Waverley Lane. Looking more specifically at comparisons with the neighbouring properties, you'll note that the eaves height does sit lower than both its 2 neighbours to the right on Stonyfields and also Waverley Lane just here. The eaves height is lower as well. Clearly one of the differences is that the roof form for this proposal does include more visible accommodation within the roof space through the inclusion of the dormers. However, you've also got a steeper roof pitch and therefore a lower eaves height as a result. Turning to the matters of consideration in relation to this application, they are firstly design and visual amenity, and secondly the impact on residential amenity. You'll see from the assessment in the report that having regard to that proposed street scene and comparisons with the existing built form, the proposal is considered to be acceptable having regard to existing built form surrounding it. And in terms of the impact on residential amenity, you'll note that it sits within a similar position to the existing dwelling, and as such, no harm is identified on neighbouring properties. The recommendation is set out for you on page 59 of the agenda report, and that is that permission be granted subject to conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Coburn.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this. I'm surprised it's come to committee, to be honest. Stonyfields is one of the typical roads in the Bourne. It's not in the Bourne, it's technically in Moor Park, but it fits into the pattern which were developed after the war when land was cheap and materials were scarce. So you've got a whole load of large sites with really quite disappointing houses in them. We actually went to look at one house in Stonyfields, and they described the kitchen as being dainty. Now, this is 30-odd years ago, and I can still remember it, because I thought, what on earth's a dainty kitchen? And when we got there, it was a shade of peacock blue, as all I can describe it. It was the most appalling kitchen you've ever seen in your life, in every sense of the word. And obviously, the estate agent had run out of words. So he came up with dainty, and that's always gone into the Coburn vocabulary now. Anything you can't quite describe is described as dainty. But there's nothing dainty about this house, I grant you. But, you know, it's in a perfectly good setting. It mirrors what's happening in all the other sites. And quite frankly, they're replacing quite mediocre houses that were built, as I say, at a time when materials were not only scarce, but not necessarily the sort of thing you'd like to build a house in. And I think most of the time what they're replacing the houses with is actually a better design and more suitable for modern life. These tend to have small kitchens, they tend to have no room for the computer, none of your second bathrooms. They were built at a different time. This will have everything a modern family could want, and We can't help but envy them, can we? But never mind. So, one of these days the lottery will come up.
Councillor Edmonds.
Can we confirm that all the construction vehicles will be on site and impose that as a condition? Farnham is congested frequently with development vehicles.
Do the officers want to comment? I would add, actually, it might help members, is that the councillor who called this particular application in, which was Councillor MacLeod, telephoned me this afternoon and said the people who had objected now wish to not pursue that objection. So I think that actually reaffirms what you said, Councillor.
Thank you, yes, thank you for the question. At present, there is not a construction transport management plan recommended. There's a couple of reasons for that. Because it's a replacement dwelling, it's not of a scale where we normally do require or consider it reasonable to require a management plan. What I would add is clearly you've got the position of the building on site. I'll just find you the existing plan here. It is really quite well set back from the road, and there are plenty of opportunities for vehicles to park and use space off the road of Stonyfields, but within the site. As such, our advice would be that a construction transport management plan would not be necessary. However, if members wish to propose that, that's something we could look into.
Yeah, I would propose it because it's a 6-bedroom house. It's a massive house, substantial house, which will take a lot of construction.
Right. Any other councillor wish to speak? Yes, Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Could the officers just, maybe there is a slide to demonstrate how many other 3-storey buildings are in the vicinity?
Thank you. Yes, I haven't done a count up for you to give you an exact number, particularly extending along the full of Stonyfields. As I say, one of the things which will make this application stand out, it does include dormers in a roof space. However, you will see that there are certainly other dwellings of that size and scale, certainly having regard to the overall ridge height, which you'll see just here, and the eaves line there. So certainly there are other dwellings of that overall height and scale. And similarly, you have the properties on Waverley Lane, not as relevant in terms of direct comparison, but again, it is there as a visual comparison that there are other buildings there which are of that similar size and scale. Certainly numbers 3 and 5 you'll see there in terms of a eaves line. Eaves line does sit higher than the proposed dwelling here, and similarly the ridge line, again, very comparable, so hopefully that's helpful.
So is it your view that it's not out of place?
That's correct, yes.
Councillor Coburn.
Stonyfields is a one-off. It was developed by individuals on individual plots. It's got no particular pattern to it, never has had. It's got no pavements as far as I remember, no road surface as far as I remember. It's as I say, it's typical of the Bourne without actually being in the Bourne. And there's these people are buying these houses and quite rightly doing them up. And if we don't have big houses on these plots, where the heck are we going to put them? We need the others as well. But I think this is such an improvement on the mediocrity of the design and the scale of the previous one that I think it's to be applauded. And there's so much room around these houses because that's how they were built. So I really don't. I think to put a construction management plan would be unreasonable, quite frankly. People are doing this all over the place, buying a house, knocking it down, building another one up, and on the whole, it doesn't impact on too many people.
Councillor Hess.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Councillor Coburn just said. I just want to say I'm very pleased to see, once again, the inclusion of an electric vehicle charging point. Thank you.
Councillor Rubini.
Yes, I just wanted to add that on the management plan for traffic, one of the things that always worries me is not necessarily the big stuff, It's the carpenters, plumbers and everybody else that arrives at the scene when the big stuff is inside already and they park on the outside on the road. I don't know whether we can mitigate that, but certainly with a road that sort of size, if they're parking on the verge and outside, I would be against it.
Councillor Edmonds.
Without a construction management plan, I've had skips, lorries block my drive, it's brought chaos, you've had lorries going over the green verges. Essentially, it's an out-of-control construction if you don't have a construction management plan.
Beth.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it is within your gift to add a condition regarding construction management plans. I would stress that would be unusual for such a condition to be added to a development of this size. My recommendation would be to add an informative recommending these measures are put in place, but the decision as decision makers lies with you. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Martin.
Councillor Edmonds, it's so far back, this new house. I know Stony Fields. I think majority will be parking in their front garden. I don't think you should need to worry about this.
And Councillor
Unfortunately, I do.
Councillor
Well, I'm sure we're not going to get into an argument about this. But actually, I do agree with Councillor Edmonds. You know, the trades converge, as Councillor Coburn referred to earlier. At the end of the project, you've got plumbers, electricians, tilers, all sorts of trades, and they will park wherever they want, and they will churn up beautiful verges. So I think, honestly, if we can put a traffic or a site management plan in place, it would be no bad thing.
Right, I'm going to make a proposal that, in fact, I'm going to take up Beth's argument that we add it as an informative rather than a sort of condition. Do I have a seconder for that?
Is there a seconder for having it as an informative?
Yes.
So, sorry, can we just take a vote on?
Yes, I think so, yes, because we're going round this house so many times. Yeah, informative only. 4 those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's 8 in favour of having an informative. Sorry, 8 in favour of having an informative.
Against? Against? Abstain? Okay.
Abstain.
So now we need to go to the vote on the recommendation with an additional informative.
Okay. We now need to go to the vote. I'm going to go so last out here. To the recommendation with that subject to conditions 1 to 8 and informatives 1 to 3 and the additional informative that permission be granted. Those in favour?
It's 8 in favour.
Abstain? How against, rather?
Without a construction management plan, no.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Right.
So that's permission granted.
Permission granted subject
with
to
the additional informative.
Right. There are no items to consider in the exempt session, thank goodness. So that concludes tonight's evening's meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you. Otherwise we could go on all night.